Adam. So today's topic, AI versus advisors. Will human financial planners become obsolete?
I love this question. I've been getting this a lot, both in media as well in podcasts. Where does AI help or hurt the financial advisor? And I'm sure that everybody in our community is really asking ourselves as they learn more about what AI can do. It's just amazing functionality we've already seen just in the last year or two. I think the accessibility of AI poses a really interesting challenge to financial advice as an industry, because one of the things that we've really put our hat on is the ability to answer very technical and complex questions that were elusive to most people. In fact, high net worth communities have always paid a significant amount to get the right answer at the right time with a bit of urgency and context. And I think AI clearly has the opportunity to disintermediate and make that accessible to everybody at virtually no cost. Where I think this really sets up a standard, though, is that advisors who use AI are clearly going to have an advantage because they're going to have more time with people. And the bigger question we've been asking recently is, what is really the value of a human financial advisor? And typically, it's about the emotional intelligence that we bring to the table. It's the experience that we've had working with other people like you that I think are going to help you make better decisions. Because it's one thing to know the information and what to do, what I should do based upon logic. There's a whole nother thing in terms of the behavioral finance to what are you going to actually do? Are you going to make better spending decisions? Are you going to actually insure versus take risk? Are you going to, manage your portfolio in an intelligent way that's non-emotional? Or are you going to kind of go revert back to put it all on red, right? So the reality about what a financial advisor helps you do is deliver context and coaching, which we're not really seeing so far in the AI tools that are there to date. However, I do think that the evolution of these AI tools is very clearly going to take away the need for financial advisors to have the technical acumen as well as the resource catalog of what's a tax code on XYZ or what is the rules around whether you can make a Roth contribution or in fact, even what's the right time to take Social Security. I think these analytical questions on how you should allocate your portfolio to optimize it are going to be obviated by AI in the next generation of these tools. And it's going to allow the human advisors to use these tools to create more revenue producing activity, which is really building relationship currency with their clients. In other words, spending more time with a greater number of clients. This recent World Economic Forum survey that came out about financial advice indicated that as much as 60 to 70% of an advisor's time will be saved through AI tools, which would enable us to apply that time to something else. For some people, it's going to be golf. For some people, it's going to be doubling down on the number of clients in likely a decreasing margin business. In other words, we think margins will shrink because the alternatives to a traditional human advisor will become greater in number and much more accessible. But that means advisors need to fill that gap in their businesses by serving more people along a wider breadth of services. That means not just insurance, not just investment, not just the typical financial planning, but also handling a whole disparate source of financial related decisions, from how I organize my family to the legal constructs, to where I'm doing banking, to what does my debt look like, to should I be considering different kinds of currency hedges and cryptos. And we need to widen the gap as to what we handle as financial advisors, especially since AI is going to power us up to be competent in so many different areas. So I think advisors need to double down on the trust resources and apply what we call the original AI, which is advisor intelligence, and find ways to apply that in real time. One of the things that we've been focusing on Asset Map is how do we have conversations around just the current facts as they exist, and then let the advisor apply that AI or advisor intelligence using also and supported by AI artificial intelligence tools to help make better decisions going forward.
So if advisors that have AI have an advantage, how is this going to affect their practices?
Well, I think that there's a couple things at work here. Number one, if we believe that AI and the next level of tech is going to make advice more accessible, it's probably true that asset management and financial planning costs to the consumer will likely go down. In other words, the overall cost that a financial advisor can charge, unless they're delivering a significant number of services, like I mentioned previously, probably prices will come down. We're typically usually seeing 80 basis points to 1% charge for assets under management, that might actually fall. And if that falls because there's so much more competition for that style of management, that resource, then conceivably what will happen is that advisors will experience personal marginal compression on the revenue that they can take home. And so we think that AI has the capacity to actually shrink the overhead cost of a practice management by replacing potentially human roles, as well as eliminating older processes, legacy processes that are high cost. And I think it's going to be a real revolution in terms of how an advisor can utilize this new technology to lower their overhead costs in delivering financial advice at scale. And that could be a really interesting challenge for the structure of a firm where it's been heavily relied upon advisors' assistants and paraplanners. That could change radically as a result of AI because the technical cost of delivering that will actually shrink. And I think what advisors are going to be forced to reconcile is really, how am I going to use AI to deliver more value or to lower overhead costs or some combination there? And I think the advisors that actually implement these tools will actually have a competitive advantage over those that really rely on a legacy process that has never been broken, that is going to become imminently more expensive to deliver.
This is all really interesting. So how are you using AI as both a tech company owner and also a practicing advisor?
Well, it's true. I have to bifurcate those two things, right? There's different compliances associated with different use cases of AI. The most prolific we've tended to see has really been on the marketing and the content front. The ability to rewrite content in the voice that you need, as well as the robustness and certainly grammar that the GPTs out there have the capacity to rewrite content or original content from scratch, is really, really, I think, effective at building thought leadership. And one of the things we have clearly seen is that the importance of thought leadership today and being present in social media and having a voice, especially an authentic one, is so critical today because for the most part, consumers are really vetting advisors and looking at what they're saying publicly before they decide to reach out and connect with you on a personal level, right? So there's really an important part of that advisors tend to miss. And AI tools today are really doing a great job of helping advisors and all of us really scale out our content and recreate it, where there's been generally a reticence to do that because of the time it takes to just create so much content. So I think that's really important. I'm also using this in my podcast, Rethink Financial Advice, where we actually have every podcast transcribed, literally remove the filler words as I just created, transcribing this information and summarizing it for a lot of the work that we need to do on the following. So production has really come down in terms of the overhead cost and time to create content in this regard. I'm also seeing some of this used in document creation as well as document summary. There's an extraordinary amount of contextual information that we need to put into human terms, especially if we want to explain how a trust works or how some prospectus is really designed for an investment, and summarizing that. We're starting to see good uses of this in the financial advisor space to make this more consumable. But I really encourage advisors out there to really look at what you can do. Recently, we had a presentation from a very well-known AI specialist on stage that showed all kinds of crazy things that people are using AI tools, from building avatars to explaining how products work, literally without the advisor or the human touching it at all. And I think it's really important that we understand what the capacity is for these tools are, so we understand how to use them in our own experience.